So, if you are breathing right now and watching this video, chances are that you've heard of this company called Google, and you actually use their products and services every single day. But something you might not know is that they also make smartphones, and they're considered one of the best in the industry, competing with the likes of Samsung and Apple. So, in this video, I'm going to show you why they're so underrated and also their drawbacks and why they're still one step behind the competition. So now sit back and enjoy the video. Alright, their story started way back in 2016 when they released the first official Pixel devices. But the crazy thing is that this wasn't the first time Google was putting out smartphones. They actually started out with a previous lineup of phones called Nexus. And these phones were a hit. People loved them, especially enthusiasts. But the thing about these phones is that they lacked identity, which is, important for a smartphone company. But this was partly because Google at the time could not manufacture their own hardware. So they moved from one manufacturer to the other for reasons that I don't know. Just take a look at the companies that made their hardware every year. It's crazy, right? It's like they literally thought and said, consistency, that's great. Let's not do that. And this meant that year after year, the phones looked very different and there was literally nothing consistent about these phones that made them stand out, except the software, but I'll get back to that in a second. So at this time, the only solution for this problem was for Google to start making their own hardware, which is exactly what they did. And that brings us back to 2016 with the release of the first ever Pixel lineup, which only consisted of the base Pixel and the Pixel XL. If you're wondering what XL means, it just means a bigger version of the same phone. I don't know. The naming was so weird. These phones, however, drove people nuts. MKBHD even called them the best Android smartphones at the time. And this was also when they cemented their place in the market as having the best smartphone camera for pictures anyways. iPhone still carried the crown for videos for a long time. So now these new phones were a great step up for Google because now it meant that they weren't just relying on having great software, which they already did. Their software was one of the best on Android. I mean, it had to be, considering that Google actually makes Android. I bet you didn't know that, but now you know. Now, for this very reason, it makes it even crazier that their phones weren't dominating the market. I personally didn't get one back then, or even at least see one, but trust me, I watched a lot of YouTube videos and they all said the same thing, so I can swear by it, basically. Now, back to the not yet part. The success of the Pixels was actually really good because they had great software, A+ camera. The design was, let's just say the design was okay, but it looked quite modern for the time with dual front-facing speakers and a two-tone body design that I thought looked pretty sweet. So yeah, I know what you're thinking. If this was such a great phone, why weren't they gaining more traction and becoming more popular? You see, Google was already embarrassingly late to establishing their identity in the smartphone market when Samsung and the likes were already dominating. So this whole thing was proving to be a lot harder than they thought. But this time they were consistent and they kept this formula over the next few years up until like the release of the Pixel 6, where they had another massive change. And these changes, I have to say, there were a lot of like serious mix of emotions because these changes range from being a really great idea on Google's part to like, what the hell were they thinking? So now let's go over some of these changes. But first, if you're enjoying the video so far, a sub to the channel would help me out so much, since this is a new channel and you can like and share the video if you're, feeling generous or something. All right, let's get some of the bad changes out of the way first. So the first major change was with the processor. So Google had this bright idea to move away from using Snapdragon processors from Qualcomm, which on paper sounds like a brilliant idea because, I mean, Apple did it and it gave the iPhones a massive gain in efficiency and performance, especially with the iPhone 13. But in Google's case, things didn't go exactly as planned. I mean, just take a look at these Geekbench scores from these charts. I mean, I don't really need to say much. But you see, the thing is, how do I say this? The worst thing wasn't even the performance, it was how it affected the battery. You see, This new chip was also very inefficient, yeah, so the battery life of the Pixels took a hit, and considering they had larger batteries than the previous Pixel 5s, but still at the same time having worse battery life in daily usage. As you can already tell, this was pretty bad. But at the time, no one really cared, especially real Pixel fans like me, because I thought these phones were pretty, like they were beautiful with their new design, which brings us to the next change. The design of these new phones were iconic, with the camera bar design that goes like across the phone, that made them stand out in a world where most phones started to look boring and so much alike. This was a change I was 100% up for, and as someone who bases at least 30% of my reasons to buy a phone on the design, I fell in love immediately I saw them. But once again, I could not own one until much later. Painful times, I must say. All right, the next big change was Android 12, also known as Material U, that shipped with the Pixel 6. It was a massive UI revamp for Android. It was fresh, colorful, brought a whole new level of personalization to the phones, and also marked a change of era for Android, which other phones like followed. See, that's one thing. Google kind of, Google phones are the first to receive a new Android update. So like that's something to note. After all these changes was when the Google Pixel phones really started to step into the light and gain some recognition, especially here in Nigeria. And believe it or not, it was around this time that I finally was able to purchase a Pixel 2 XL. Crazy, right? But I sure enjoyed the phone. The phone was like, I loved it like crazy. But you see now, this was the new formula that Google had. And I'm actually glad they stuck to it, because even if it was far from perfect and had a lot of rough edges that needed to be ironed out, it was something they focused on over the next 3 years. And this gave way to the most exciting times for Pixel phones, where we saw massive jumps in improvements, which with each new versions of the phones every year, until we got to the new designs of the Pixel 9s last year, which was a very solid choice. And Google knew this worked, so they kept a lot of similarities with the Pixel 10 this year, which I'm honestly not mad about, because, well, it works. All these improvements over the years brings us to today, where the Pixel is still known for great cameras, and now even for videos. Great battery life, even though not the best right now, but it's right up there with, the big dogs, along with leading the industry now with new AI features that are being added every year, paired with Material 3 Expressive, which is the updated version of Material U that brings even more customization to Pixels. And I honestly think that Google is finally at a pretty good place with their phones, even though there's still like so much to improve on. And I honestly think they'll get there for sure at some point. But for now, the Pixels still remain the perfectly imperfect smartphones. At least that's what I like to call them. Alright, I actually plan on making more videos like this, so if you found this interesting, even just a little bit, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.